In the annals of military history, there exists a tale so bizarre that it seems almost too outlandish to be true. In 1932, on the sun-scorched plains of Western Australia, the country's armed forces waged war, not against a human enemy, but against a bird. This was the Great Emu War, a conflict that pitted soldiers against Australia's largest native bird, with unexpected and often comical results. The story begins in the aftermath of World War I. Australian soldiers returning from the battlefields of Europe were promised land to farm as part of their reintegration into civilian life. Thousands of veterans took up the challenge, settling in Western Australia's Wheatbelt region. But farming in the arid, unforgiving landscape was no easy task. By the early 1930s, the Great Depression had further exacerbated their struggles, with plummeting wheat prices leaving many farmers on the brink of ruin. And then came another challenge, one they could never have anticipated. Emus, large flightless birds native to Australia, began migrating from inland regions to the fertile farmlands in search of food and water. Their arrival was devastating. Tens of thousands of emus descended on the Wheatbelt, trampling crops, destroying fences and creating havoc for already struggling farmers. Desperate for a solution, the farmers turned to the government for help. Their pleas reached the ears of Sir George Pearce, Australia's Minister of Defence, who proposed an unorthodox solution: deploy the military to cull the emus. Armed with machine guns and soldiers, the operation would bring military precision to a problem of nature. And so, in November 1932, Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery was dispatched, leading a small group of soldiers armed with Lewis guns, a machine gun used during World War I, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The mission? To wage war on the emus. The soldiers quickly discovered that emus were no easy targets. These birds, standing nearly 2 meters tall, were fast, agile, and surprisingly intelligent. The first encounters were disastrous. The soldiers set up an ambush near a watering hole, expecting to mow down the birds in large numbers. But the emus scattered as soon as the guns were fired, darting in all directions and evading the gunfire. In one instance, a machine gun jammed after just a few shots, allowing the emus to escape unscathed. Despite their best efforts, the soldiers found it nearly impossible to outmaneuver or outsmart these flightless adversaries. The birds travelled in groups, using their speed and agility to evade their pursuers, and the rugged terrain further hampered the soldiers' efforts. The emus seemed almost defiant, adapting to the soldiers' tactics. Some even described them as employing guerrilla warfare, moving in small, coordinated groups that would appear suddenly and then vanish into the bush. The military effort became a source of frustration and, eventually, ridicule. Australian newspapers quickly picked up the story, mocking the campaign and dubbing it the Great Emu War. The public found humour in the idea of trained soldiers being outwitted by birds. Despite firing thousands of rounds, the military managed to kill only a small number of emus, while the majority continued to wreak havoc on the farms. After several weeks of unsuccessful combat, the military withdrew. Major Meredith later remarked on the resilience of the emus, comparing them to tanks for their ability to absorb bullets and keep running. The operation was deemed a failure, and the emus had effectively won the war. In the aftermath, the government turned to alternative solutions, offering bounties to hunters and investing in better fencing to protect farmland. While these measures were more effective, the emu population remained a challenge for farmers for years to come. Today, the Great Emu War stands as a curious footnote in Australian history, a conflict that highlights the challenges of balancing nature with human activity. It is a story of resilience, not just of the farmers who struggled to survive, but of the emus who proved that even the might of military technology could be thwarted by nature's ingenuity. The Great Emu War of 1932 was not a victory for humanity, but a reminder of the unpredictable power of nature. It remains one of history's most peculiar conflicts, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest battles are not against men, but against the wild.